Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Hey, Rod here at A Better Way to Farm. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. I appreciate it. The question of the day is, should I bale and should I sell my corn stalks? How am I going to manage that residue? Well, let's talk about that. And let's do some facts and figures here, guys, on what we're doing before we launch off into just wholesaling off all of our nutrients, all of our organic matter, all of our residue. The fact of the matter is, guys, when we start baling those stalks, we may very well be robbing next year's crop before we even get started. Everybody gets to worrying about, oh, you're going to deplete your soils. You got to put on a lot of dry. You got to do a blow and go and put on 250 pounds of DAP, 250 pounds of potash. Takes a lot of nitrogen, blah, blah, blah. I've got some facts and figures here I'm going to share with you. These are university numbers from the University of Nebraska. And I'm super excited about this. And I just ask that you respectfully listen and think. That's our goal, is to always make you think and make you ask better questions. So let's walk through what happens when we take those stalks off the field and why we may want to rethink this whole concept of baling and selling our residue. I understand the reasons for it. I get the fact that oftentimes we say, hey, it's not a great year. Revenue is down. Let's get some extra income. Let's sell those corn stalks. I get that. The goal of the business actually is to survive, to live another year. We want to make a profit, but we definitely want to survive. We get that. Now, sometimes we decide that we want to bale those because we're going to use them for bedding for ourselves. If we're going to use them for bedding for ourselves, and then we're going to take that and put it back on the field where we took it off from, that's kind of a zero-sum game, and we are 100% in favor of doing that. Sometimes we want to do it because we don't want to deal with the residue. And we're going to talk about how to better deal with that. And I get it. Our corn across the road here it's by far the biggest crop we have ever had. And I've never had that kind of residue to deal with. And so we're going to talk specifically about what we're going to do as we start dealing with that, and maybe some alternatives, some things that you can do. The bottom line is it sounds like a win until we take a look at what we're really hauling away. The first thing we really want to talk about on this is the nutrient value. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because, guys, this is big. Each ton of those corn stalks has nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, all of your micros, all of your secondaries that need to go back into the soil and be recycled to go back into the plant. And the fact of the matter is, guys, we're probably baling off enough acres. We're hauling away thousands of dollars of fertilizer. You know, the fact is this. I get guys all the time talking about the fact that nutrients are expensive. Inputs are killing us. I get all of that. So let's talk about the cost here. According to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, if you're growing corn in the 175 bushel range, your uptake of potassium is going to be somewhere around 175 pounds. In other words, for every bushel you grow, you uptake at least a pound of potassium. Now, when you move up and your corn yield goes from 175 to 257, your uptake went from 175 pounds of the acre to goes up to 1.75 pounds per bushel. So you're somewhere in that 450 range. You got to put 450 pounds of potassium into that plant per acre in order to get that yield. Here's the kicker. And guys, I'm seeing removal rates all over the board. I got people trying to say, oh, for every bushel of grain you take off, you're taking a pound of phosphorus and a pound of potassium. I believe that number is brought to you by people who very much desire to sell you a lot of nutrients. Guys, everything that we can find would say that your removal rate on phosphorus will be somewhere between 0.28 and 0.35. Your removal rate on potassium is going to be pretty consistent between 0.2 pounds and 0.35 pounds. Not more really than a third of a pound per bushel. So here's the deal, because a lot of these guys, I'm basing this on the 250 bushel grower, but a 250 bushel grower For every bushel that you're growing, left over in the stover, there is about 1.5 pounds of K. So if you're growing 250 bushel corn, that means that stover has 375 pounds of potassium per acre. Per acre. What's the value of that? Here's one for you. Pounds of uptake and they do talk about this. In nitrogen, it's going to take somewhere around 1.1 pounds of nitrogen of uptake. That doesn't mean you need to apply that, but there is 1.1 pounds of nitrogen taken into the plant for every bushel of corn that you grow. Your removal rate on 250 bushel corn, 0.65. That means for every bushel that you take off, what? What'd you leave behind? About 0.4 pounds of nitrogen. So 250 bushel corn, there's 60 pounds of nitrogen here that we need to be thinking about what are we doing with. Phosphorus, same sign. We're going to have phosphorus left over. Not a lot, but there will be some left in the stover. Guys, what's the value of 375 pounds of K? What's the value of 60 pounds of nitrogen? This year, it's going to be substantial, and I mean really substantial. So before we get all carried away saying, oh, I can't deplete my soils, I got to put a lot on. Am I depleting my soils just because I got short-sighted and wanted to sell? No, I understand. Sometimes we do what we got to do. Maybe we're in a position where I need that revenue, and I can get 5 bales to the acre, and I can get $50 a crack out of them, which I highly doubt, but let's say you can. That's $250 an acre, and you say, I'm going to bleed my levels down because I need that money. I get it, okay? We're not here to be judgmental. We are here to say, have your eyes wide open and be aware of what you're doing, because we are selling off hundreds of dollars of nutrients when we do this. And we want to make sure we're getting at least hundreds of dollars back. You know, oftentimes I'm reminded of the story of the guy who farmed in the farming season, and then he was hauling hay to Florida to make a little extra income. And he was losing somewhere just about $1 a bale on every bale that he hauled to Florida. So he did the only logical thing he could think of. He bought another truck. Sometimes we do that, guys. Sometimes we double down, and we want to make sure that we're doing that. Guys, let's talk about organic matter. What happens to organic matter? Obviously, yes, the roots are still there, but there's a lot of residue there that will help us. That's going to help us build soil structure. That's going to feed the microbes. It's going to improve water infiltration. It's going to cut down on erosion. And when we remove that, we're starving our soil biology. The fact of the matter is we are hurting ourselves in so many ways. Without that cover, we end up with more compaction, we end up with more crusting, and we end up with a lot of nutrient loss. Guys, the long-term costs need to be considered. We need to talk about how we're going to replace what we have removed. And we've got to make sure that we don't let this get away from us. We don't want to see our soil tilth and our moisture retention decline over time. Guys, you know, every point of organic matter that you increase improves your water holding ability by 3/4 of an inch. Every time you drop it a point, you lose the ability to hold that 3/4 of an inch of rain. So what are we after? We want to see you jack your organic matter up a couple of points and be able to hang on to another 1.5 inches and be more drought tolerant, as opposed to taking away 2 points and watching us become way less drought tolerant. The short-term check that we get often will not offset the long-term losses in fertility and yield. We see this over and over again. Short-term gains lead to long-term pain. At our house, we call them long cuts. We get people who try to cheat the system, and they try to take a shortcut to whatever it is. And it almost always works out that it's not a shortcut, it's a long cut. And guys, we don't want to be taking the long cuts. Let's talk about some alternatives. Alternative number 1. Let's talk about something we can do to speed up that breakdown. We've had a lot of people reach out to us and say, hey, what is it that we can do? You guys have a recipe for a stock digester. Yes, we do. And when we do that, we speed up breakdown, we speed up nutrient recycling, and we speed up returning those nutrients into the soil to be reused next year. Another option is to chop that residue as fine and disperse it as evenly as we possibly can. It's one of the things that we're going to do here is we are going to continue to go back in and chop that. We're actually going to run a brush cutter set very low and chop our residue up just as fine as we can. Hopefully, before we run that chopper through there, we're going to come in and spray the stock digester on it in order to speed that residue up. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Guys, the third thing we got to do is we have to make sure we're managing that carbon to nitrogen ratio. We're going to be using nitrogen or ATS in order to do that, because that in and of itself will help that residue to decay. Option number 4, only remove the stalks in limited cases. You know, if we've got a problem out there that we got something we have to deal with, maybe we have to take it off. But ideally, if we're doing that, we're hauling it for our own cattle, for our own bedding, and we're going to take it back and replace the nutrients. Here's the bottom line, guys. It's not about doing more work. It's about letting nature do the work for you. And anytime we can do that, it's going to make our life better. You know, you hear us say all the time, life's not that hard. Figure out how it works and get on the right side of it. So what do we want to look at for action steps? Well, step number 1, we want to test our soil and see what do we have there and what do we need. What we want to do is calculate that nutrient value per ton of residue. And I would encourage you to take this little sheet from the University of Nebraska and say, okay, here's the value of each pound of N, each pound of P, each pound of K. What am I going to be removing and getting rid of? And then we want to compare and say, hey, here's the value of the bales. This is what I'm getting out of them. Here's the value of what it's going to cost me just to replace the nutrients. Doesn't count for the organic matter, doesn't count for soil tilth, doesn't count for reduced erosion, doesn't count for all those things that help us. And the fact of the matter is, maybe, guys, we need to say, let's do some experimenting. And let's talk about how it is that we can better manage this residue. And maybe we start small, but we start looking at some options as to what to do this. Guys, here's the bottom line on the whole deal. Residue isn't trash. Residue isn't something that's to be a trouble. Residue is a treasure. And every bit of stalk and leaf that we leave behind is next year's nutrition waiting to go to work for you. It wants to help you. It wants to work for you. Let it. Let it do that. So here's your call to action, guys. If you would like this 4 products that you need, this 4 ingredient residue breakdown formula, you need to text Karen the word digester at 641-919-5570. That's 641-919-5570. And she'll get that to you, or a member of the team will reach out. Guys, when I get into this paper, when I start looking at the research from different universities, and I start seeing the amount of residue that is left behind, and I start calculating the value of what's there, it literally makes my stomach churn to think that I'm going to sell my stocks and I'm going to get back maybe a third, maybe 25%. Very rarely will I get back 50% of just the nutrient value. You know our credo, it's never wrong to do the right thing, and everything that happens in ag is good for somebody. The question is who? Let's do the right thing, and let's make sure what happens here is good for you, for the end user, because guys, we have to survive in the short term, but we have to think long term, and we want to do that. So guys, remember this. When you do the right thing, for the right reason, at the right time, everything else that you do will work for you. Let's make this go. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in, and as always, we really do hope you're having a better day.